All right, we're going to learn a different form of a linear equation. So we just got done with slope-intercept form, but now we're going to learn this point-slope form. Slope-intercept doesn't always cut it depending on the scenario. So here's slope-intercept. Remember, it's easy to write the equation when we know the slope and the y-intercept. So if we're given a slope, let's say the slope is 2, we have 2x, or y equals mx, plus, oops, these are backwards, right? This is slope. And this is y-intercept. So our slope is 2, and our y-intercept is 5. We have this equation y equals 2x plus 5, right? Simple enough, but sometimes, again, we don't have all that information, so what do we do from there? So sometimes we're going to have to write an equation if we know the slope and a point rather than a slope and an intercept. So we have a slope of 2 and a point on that line, 3, 5 is our ordered pair. So let's take a look at this on a graph. So we've graphed our point 3, 5 right here, and we have a slope of 2. I'm going to write it as rise over run, so 2 over 1. So one thing we could do is we could use that slope from our ordered pair and find our y-intercept, see where it goes through the y-axis. So if it's a rise of 2, right? It's supposed to say rise. It's a rise of 2 and a run of 1. We could do that on our graph and say, okay, rise of 2, so I'm going to go down 2. I'm going to go over 1, down 2, over 1. I haven't hit the y-axis yet, so down 2, over 1, and it looks like there's my y-intercept. So I could write an equation, y equals 2x. My y-intercept ended at -1. There's my equation, y equals 2x minus 1. So I could do that, but what if my y-intercept ends up being somewhere between -2 and -3, and I don't know exactly where that is? That's going to be a decimal, and I can't just guess. What do I do from there? So there are some times when I can't just use that slope. The graph might be too big. My values might not be friendly. The y-intercept might not go through a whole number. So again, what do I do from there? That's where we have this point-slope form. All right, so instead of slope-intercept, we don't have a y-intercept, I have a point. So I have y equals m times x minus x sub 1 plus y sub 1. Now x1, x sub 1, and y sub 1 are just the ordered pair that I'm given. So in the previous slide, that ordered pair was 3, 5. So x sub 1 is 3, y sub 1 is 5. And my slope in that case was 2. Okay, so I would substitute those values to get my point-slope form. So let's take a look at a couple of examples. So we have some equations in point-slope form, and you need to recognize the slope and the point that was given to you in order to get that equation. Now we know that our 2/3 here is our slope, the slope of 2/3, and what's our point? Well, it looks like this is x sub 1 and y sub 1, right? Because it's x minus x sub 1. So x sub 1 is 3 plus y sub 1, so plus 5. So my point that I was given was 3, 5. Okay, well, let's look at a different one. I'm going to be a little bit careful. So again, my slope is easy to recognize, so I'm multiplying by, so my slope is -5. And it looks like I have an x sub 1 and a y sub 1 right here, but what's the sign that goes with my 2? So remember, this was x minus x sub 1. Well, this is x plus x sub 1. Well, how do I get to a positive 2 if I'm subtracting? That would mean I would have x minus -2, right? So x minus -2 is the same as x plus 2. So in this case, my x sub 1 is -2. So when it comes to the x's, in other words, you're using the opposite sign from what you're given. So this looks like a -3. My point is +3. This looked like a +2. My x value is -2. And this is +6. So my y-intercept is 6. So I'm going to pause for a second. I'd like you to pause for a second to try the other two. All right, so go ahead and check your values with mine and see if they agree, and let's make sure mine are all right. So we did 1 and 2 together. Let's do the last two. So I have a slope of -1, because remember, whenever there's not a coefficient, that's an invisible coefficient of 1. So I have a slope of -1, and I have my x and y values. I did a +1, because remember, this is x minus x sub 1, so x minus 1. Or you can think of it as this looks like a -1, so my x value is the opposite of that, so +1. And then over here, I have a -9, right? Or I can think of it as plus -9. So my y value is, in this case, is -9. So when you do your y sub 1, it's going to be plus y sub 1. So if I have -9, that's the same as plus -9. All right, last one, I have a slope of 1/2. That's easy to spot. In this case, my x sub 1 and my y sub 1 are in a different order. So here's my x sub 1, which means my y sub 1 must be this value over here. So it looks like I have an x value of +3, again, the opposite of -3. And it looks like I have a y sub 1 of -2. So 3 and -2. And so let's go the other direction. Now if I have an equation, if I have a slope and a point, I want to go back now and write the equation. So let's check this first one that I did already. So I have a slope of 3, so I substituted that for m. I have an x value of -2. So again, remember, this is minus x sub 1, so minus -2. And I have a y value of +6, so plus +6. I could go back, and minus -2 is the same as plus 2, right? So I'm going to change that to x plus 2. And I'm going to do one more, and then I'm going to have you take a look at a couple others. All right, so far in this one, I have a slope of -7. So I'm going to start that off, substitute my slope of -7, and now I'm going to need to fill in the rest. So let's look at what my point is. My x sub 1 and my y sub 1. This is x sub 1 and y sub 1. All right, so let's make sure we get those in the right places. So I have x minus and x minus x sub 1. Well, x sub 1 is -4. So x minus -4. Well, we know that minus negative is the same as plus positive. So -7 times x plus 4 plus y sub 1. So plus -6. I could say plus -6, or I could just say -6. So that's one way to write it. I think what you're normally going to see, though, is just -6. So we'll write it that way. All right, so I'm going to pause here, and I'd like you to pause for a moment, and I want you to do the next couple of problems. All right, so go ahead and check your answers with mine for these last couple. I have a slope of 3/4. Right here, I have a slope of 3/4 times my x minus x sub 1. So x sub 1 is 8. So x minus 8. And I have a y value of +2. So plus y sub 1 plus 2. Right? And finally, for the bottom, I have a slope of -5/8 right here. X minus x sub 1, so x minus 7, plus y sub 1, so plus -1, or just -1.